To God be all the glory forever and ever. Amen. Welcome to the Gospel Bite by the grace of God. Today's Gospel Bite will be a reflection on a very encouraging observation which I have made from the Bible, from the book of Psalm chapter number 103, verse number 7. I am calling this the double or the twin blessing or the twin understanding. Can also call it the twin distinction. But basically I want to bring into our reflection today the aspect of God's ways and God's deeds. God's ways and God's deeds. Now in the book of Psalm 103, verse number 7, that verse reads, "He made known his ways to Moses, his deeds to the people of Israel." Now, that is not the only verse that hints or makes a suggestion or an indication of the fact that in God, or God desires to make himself known to his people by his deeds and also by his ways. And this is exactly what the psalmist here is reflecting about and referring to. You can read this verse together with other verses or other references, which I can give to you, but I will not be reading all of them. Exodus chapter number 33, verse number 13, Psalm 78:11, Psalm 106 and verse 13, Psalm 25 verse 4, Psalm 27 verse 11, Psalm 86 verse 11, Isaiah 55 verse 8 to 9, Romans 11 verse 33. And in all those references you will find the two or one of or a singular hint to either ways or deeds. Now in the psalm that I have just read, that is 103 and verse number 7, it is the song of thanksgiving which was sung by David and a praise psalm. It was a celebration psalm of celebrating God's mercy, forgiveness, and steadfast love. And in verse number 7, he draws a distinction between knowing God's ways and seeing his deeds, that is acts, matendo na njia za Bwana. Now this distinction is evident in all of Israel's history. You read through the entire record of God's dealings with his chosen people, Israel, and you will find these two things happening concurrently. There is the one on one hand, God's ways, and on the other hand, his deeds. Israel saw the mighty acts of God. In Exodus, we read about the miracles that God performed. We see all those miracles. We remember them very vividly. I do not want to begin to discuss about those miracles, but we all know them. And one of the outstanding miracles that God performed was when he separated the Red Sea. He parted the waters and the children of Israel were able to pass as if they were passing on dry ground. And that was a display of God's power. It was a miracle that they saw. Now, we continue and see that even as much as these miracles were performed by God and the Israelites saw them, often they failed to trust him when he tested them. You can read that in Psalm 95 verse 9 to 10. Moses, however, sought to understand God's heart. He prayed in Exodus chapter 33, verse number 13, "Show me your ways, O Lord, that I may know you. Show me now your ways, that I may know you." We see that God's acts makes us to know his power, but his ways reveal his heart. There is a great distinction there between knowing God's power and understanding his heart. Now, every believer, therefore, has an innate desire, or not only believers, but also in all human race, all human beings. Within us, there is an innate desire put there by God. But it is more encouraging for the believer, because for the believer, God has put in our hearts His Spirit, so that by His Spirit we are able to experience His heart. We are able to relate with His heart. Seeing God's deeds can inspire us and make us to have an attitude of awe. It's like we are in shock. We are amazed. And sometimes I find believers and people saying, making this statement, yale mambo Mungu ametenda hata siamini. I don't know why watu hupenda kusema siamini or I don't believe, because ideally when we see these things, they should encourage us to believe. But I think it is because of the shock of the miracle, the extent of those miracles, that mpaka mtu anasema, hata siamini Mungu amefanya hivyo. But actually we should say that statement in the other way. We should reverse that statement to say, I have seen it and I believe this is God's power. Faith in our lives will deepen when we understand the heart behind the miracles and we proclaim, I believe. When we see these miracles, we should develop and build faith to the extent that we say, I truly believe. I remember when the disciples of Jesus, when he appeared to them after his resurrection in the upper room, and one of the disciples was not present. We call him Thomas. When Thomas came, in the second instance, when Jesus came again, he is the person who said, I see and I believe. He believed as a result of seeing. And therefore, we look at that lesson, and Jesus said at the end of that lesson that you, Thomas, believe because you have seen. Blessed are they who will believe without seeing. And therefore, it is not bad to see, but we must outgrow seeing. We must go beyond what we can see and believe in our hearts that even when God does not do anything, we still believe. Now, seeing can easily fade away and lead to forgetfulness. The things that we see, sometimes we can forget them, especially when we are faced with a difficult challenge than the one that we experienced beforehand. We can easily forget the earlier one and be thrown into a situation of disbelief or not believing and forgetting completely about what had happened. That you can read in Psalm 106 and verse number 13, which says, they soon forgot his works. They waited not for his counsel. We see again that distinction there. The works of God and the counsel of God. Those are two different things which are important and separate, but we should not rely more on the seeing. We should go beyond seeing and believe by faith. Moses knew that God is merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and that he was filled with abundant life, and that truth was his way. When we know God's ways, we can trust him even when his acts seem delayed or hidden. I remember at this instance, one of the incidents that took place in the Old Testament, I believe it is in the book of Daniel, when these three servants of God, or friends of God, let me call them that, were faced with a situation that required them not to depend on what they could see, but to depend on their awareness and knowledge and understanding of God. Now, they made a very wonderful statement when they were threatened with being thrown into the furnace. They made a statement which I do not think that many of us can say today. And I think that is why we should be able to grow ourselves into more of knowing than more of seeing. They said, we believe that our God is able to save us. We know his ways. But even if he does not save us, we will still not bow to this idol. That is not a very simple statement to say. By any standards, especially when you are threatened in your life, that you could be executed or you could be killed as a result of what you are being required to do. So those people did not only have an awareness, or they had not only seen the acts of God,